Since the dawn of the 21st century, scientific discovery has rushed forward at lightning speed. Genetics, physics, computerized technology, robotics, virtual reality. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert as they uncover the truths behind this ultimate scientific deception. Welcome to SciFriday.
There's a big rock out in outer space that is headed into the neighborhood of Earth. Watch this.
Hidden deep within ancient scriptures, it is written that in the beginning, the ultimate agent of chaos was already restrained by the Creator. As creation flourished, this force of destruction remained subdued, waiting for his time of freedom. Humanity kept record of this malevolent spirit in order to warn future generations. These ancient prophecies foretell a messenger will precede the release of the great evil, known to the Hebrews as Leviathan, but to the Egyptians as Apophis.
Welcome to It's SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert, here on a special mission with our special guest, who we could only get on this program by sneaking out of town to an undisclosed location in a neighboring state. Actually, we're in Oklahoma City to be guests on the Prophecy Watchers program tomorrow to talk about this film, so we decided to take advantage of the opportunity to discuss it. It is a jaw-dropping film, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Tom Horn is featured in this film. It is called Ragnarok, Humanity's Last Stand, and joining us is the award-winning documentary filmmaker Josh Peck. Josh,
hey, Derek.
Thank you for taking time to sit down with us tonight.
Yeah. Shall I resurrect an old joke and say, hi, sweetie?
If you were a longtime viewer of SciFriday, then you'll understand.
They'll know what that means.
Yes. Ragnarok.
Yeah.
It's an interesting title. We're talking about asteroid Apophis, which is scheduled to do a near pass of Earth, according to the experts, on April 13th of 2029. Why the title Ragnarok? How does that connect to Apophis?
Yeah, Ragnarok is an old ancient myth from Norse mythology about the end of the world, and it seemed to tie in because that's kind of what the film is about. It's not from a Norse perspective. Of course, ours is from a Christian perspective, but by this point, especially with Marvel movies and stuff, everyone knows what Ragnarok is by now. So felt like a really good title. Right when you see the cover, you know exactly what it is. It's something about the end of the world, something about an asteroid, and something that looks really exciting.
How much thought went into choosing a title that might draw in viewers who wouldn't normally look at something dealing with Bible prophecy?
Yeah, that's what we tried to do. We did that with the last couple of films too, Silent Cry and Great Delusion. If you're not a Christian, you don't know what those terms are, then you might be more interested in checking it out. With this one, everybody's going to know what Ragnarok is. And so there's a good potential to possibly bring in non-believers in a way that's not dishonoring Christ or something like that, because it's just a word. But the subtitle, though, that actually had a lot more thought into it. And all it is Humanity's Last Stand. But that took us so long to come up with that. We had an email chain. I think you were a part of it. And we had 20 or 30 ideas, like me, you, Tom, Derek, well, you are Derek, Allie, Sharon, I meant to say, Donna. We were all in this big email chain. So we had a whole bunch of secondary titles, subtitles that we never used, but that one seemed to really fit. It just kind of clarifies what we're talking about.
What's different about this film, I think, is that you start by dealing with the science.
Yes.
And that's why we feel comfortable bringing this to you on SciFriday today. Who did you talk to and what information did you get?
Oh, man. Well, if you have however long the first third of the film is, I can tell you all of it. But we actually got quite a few guests. We have a couple of scientists who are Christians, because you can't say Christian scientists. That's something completely different.
Right.
But one, Dr. Michael Strauss, he works at CERN, actually.
Really?
Yeah, fascinating guy, really pleasant guy, too. But he's in the film, brilliant. and Dr. Jeff Zweerink, who works with Hugh Ross's ministry. But
right.
yeah, he's got a PhD in astrophysics and I think a couple other things that he mentions in the film. Those were the two main scientists that I wanted to have on, and especially because they have a little bit differing view than where the film actually ends up going. Because with part of his work at CERN, Dr. Michael Strauss also works with NASA, NEOWISE. He has involvement with some of those kinds of things. And both of them did not give me any indication that they felt like there was some kind of cover-up at NASA. But we do talk about that in the film because it kind of seems like there might be a cover-up at NASA.
NEOWISE, for people not familiar with what is NEOWISE?
Right. It's a satellite that they use to track asteroids, basically. Yeah, near Earth objects. Right. Yeah. And according to this other scientist who we don't have in the film, but we have quotes from him, Nathan Myhrvold, he actually says that the way, and he's a scientist too, he says that the way that NEOWISE handles its data, there's something off that could mess up some of their measurements. So right now, and the reason that we care about that is right now they're saying that Apophis is going to come very close to Earth, but not actually strike the Earth. Well, if their math is even a little bit off, that could have huge consequences. So when somebody says, this NEOWISE thing, it's great, but there's some things that are a little off here, or when there's another person who's not technically in the film, but we talk about throughout the film, Harry Lear, mathematician, when he says, pi, you can physically measure a circle and find out it's not 3.1416 or whatever the traditional view is. It's something like 3.1466 or something. I might not have those numbers exactly right. I'm not a mathematician
basically
myself.
What he's saying is that pi is not what we've been taught.
Right.
The number is slightly off.
Right. And if he's right, and again, I don't really have a way to verify because I'm not a mathematician, but I wanted to include it in the movie because it's another view that people should investigate. But if he's off, that little difference could have huge implications for how they measure the arc, the trajectory of the Apophis asteroid. And then there's even Neil deGrasse Tyson, who admitted that these things are really difficult to read. It'll dip below our orbiting satellites. I mean, that's really close.
That's really close.
Yeah. So even one little thing off somewhere. And in the movie, I show several examples where you don't even have to have anything nefarious happen, just human error. Because of computer errors. I mean, like the Mars rover went down or was missing for a while or something. And I show several examples how even if there is no conspiracy at NASA, these kinds of things happen. They can happen pretty easily. And something Dr. Jeff Zweerink said, is that there are objects that are too small to really track. So there's a good percentage of things they can't track. Well, who's to say one of those objects isn't in a collision course itself that could knock off Apophis's asteroid, even if all of the math is correct? They would have no way to track those things. So there's several areas where, yes, NASA is saying it's not going to strike, but how confident are we that they know that for 100% sure?
For one thing, it's very dim, so they've got to depend on visual observations of where it is.
Yes.
In the sky, based on past observations. They also have to assume it's not going to hit something else on the way in.
Right.
And they've got to account for the Yarkovsky effect, which is basically the influence on that object, the gravitational pull of some of the larger objects in the solar system, but even the smaller objects that they don't know how to quantify.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are a lot of variables there that they are trying to calculate, and obviously they've all got a vested interest in wanting to know whether it's going to hit the Earth, because, I assume that all of those astrophysicists keep all of their stuff here on Earth.
Right, you would think.
So I'm sure they want to do a good job there.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to include those two scientists, because when you see them, you see they're genuine. These aren't secretive, shadowy guys. I mean, even the guy that works at CERN, he's like the sweetest guy in the whole movie. But I wanted to include them to show that even if there is a cover-up, that doesn't mean that all of NASA is bad, or like every single member there. It could be just like a small group of people, or it could just be an error. The Uranowski effect is really interesting too, because there are plans. I don't know if there's patents yet, but there are plans to try building spacecraft to a propulsion system based on that. I mean, there's even like light sails. Like you could have a large sail that collects all these photons. It's essentially like sailing a ship, but instead of wind, it's photon and cosmic rays.
Science fiction writers have been writing about that for years.
Yeah.
My favorite sci-fi author, Larry Niven, was writing about light sails back in the 60s.
Yeah. Using
powerful lasers to power these craft into outer space.
Exactly.
But Yeah, I mean,
You could easily have the same thing bouncing off this asteroid that could affect the trajectory, and even a small effect. I mean, if Earth's gravity gets enough hold of that thing, then there's no stopping it.
Well, what would be the impact, or what would be the effect of an impact of something the size of Apophis?
It'd be devastating. Some people say could possibly be world-ending. I say not, because I read Revelation and I know that that's not how it ends. But it looks like it would be extremely devastating. It depends on where it hits. So if it hits on the land, especially if it hits near like a volcanic, like the Cascadias or something like that, that would be devastating and probably kill a lot of people on the planet. Wouldn't end the planet. There would still be some survivors, but not many. It'd be really difficult. If it hits in the ocean, there's a little bit better of a chance, but still all the coastal regions, tsunamis. And then if that impact is enough to set off other volcanoes and stuff. I mean, you got that whole ring of fire
in the Pacific.
Yeah, so that could be devastating too. Now, what's really scary is we explore the option, Tom brings this up, what if it's a binary asteroid, or what if it breaks apart in our atmosphere? Because when you read, we kind of connect it with the trumpet judgments. Mm-hmm. When you read the trumpet judgments, you have something falling from the sky, something lands on the land, something lands in the ocean. And you can actually read, like, I think the first 4 or 5 trumpet judgments as like a chain reaction of things that could happen. And Tom actually said, and he's talked to scientists himself and stuff too in his books, The Messenger and the Wormwood Prophecy, that chain of events, scientists agree that's what it would be if this impact happened in that way.
Wow.
So that's pretty fascinating.
Well, let's discuss the trumpet judgments. I just happen to have it open right here, thinking that we might go there, and we'll continue our conversation with Josh Peck about the movie Ragnarok, Humanity's Last Stand, when SciFriday continues. Who would have thought just a few years ago we'd find ourselves in a world where refusing an experimental medicine could keep you from traveling, going to the store, or even cost you your job? Actually, we did. My novel, The God Conspiracy, was published last year when it suddenly became much more relevant than it had been when I started writing it more than 15 years ago. And I drew on characters and ideas developed by Sharon a few years earlier for her novel, The Armageddon Strain. We'd like to make The God Conspiracy available to you as part of our special offer during the month of August. It's a fast-moving story of people, ordinary people, who find themselves in circumstances beyond their control, and the only ones who really understand what's going on are those who see that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. During the month of August, we'll send you The God Conspiracy and 12 hours of video teachings. Our 2 DVD sets, Unmasking the Ancient Gods and This Is War. 4 discs in all, 12 hours of video teachings. A retail value altogether of $120 for just $35 plus shipping and handling. This offer is only available during the month of August and only at our store. Available online at gilberthouse.org. Welcome back to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert. We're on location in Oklahoma City as we're getting ready to talk to prophecy watchers tomorrow morning about Josh Peck's new documentary film, Ragnarok, Humanity's Last Stand, which looks at incoming asteroid Apophis and Tom Horn's dream about this, and perhaps connecting Apophis to Wormwood, which is one of the trumpet judgments. And had Tom not been so accurate with not just the resignation of Pope Benedict,
right,
and a number of other things that his family has shared with us privately about things that Tom predicted that came true. And knowing the Horn family now as we do, that they don't invent things like this just for the sake of trying to sell books or DVDs. This is why we're taking this seriously. The 7 trumpet judgments are like this. The first angel blew his trumpet. This is Revelation 8, beginning at verse 7. And there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And 1/3 of the earth was burned up, and 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up.
Yeah, so the way Tom would say is that's like the first part of the impact, not the main stuff, but the stuff that's orbiting around the big chunk of rock or whatever. That's the shrapnel that enters first. And apparently, scientifically, with something that big, that is how it happens.
So it's got enough gravitational pull to have its own sort of mini satellites that would be damaging in of themselves.
Potentially, yeah.
The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood, and 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. A great mountain burning with fire sure sounds like an asteroid, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And if you imagine John in his time, if he saw an asteroid, how would you, I mean, I could see myself describing it that way if I didn't know what an asteroid was, or potentially have never seen one. That's what it would look like.
And the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter.
Yeah. So Tom says in the movie that it's possible this could be this asteroid. It could break apart. Some of the shrapnel from that breaking apart in our atmosphere hits first. That's the first trumpet. Half of it goes into the ocean. That's the second trumpet. And then the other half hits on the rivers and the land and stuff. Rivers kind of makes me think of America, but who knows? We don't know what region it's actually talking about. But the effect is it has some kind of poisoning to it. Tom says that it could be a deadly microbe, an extremophile perhaps. Gary Stearman is in the film as well. He says that it's something that seems water soluble, that when it's released into the water, it makes the water some kind of poison. And actually, we have Ryan Peterson in the film too. He actually explains how wormwood in the original Greek means like a poison, like bitter water, like a poison. So all of that put together, we're right in the chain of events that scientifically, if this type of event were to happen, that is exactly how it would happen.
Now, when the fourth angel blows his trumpet, quoting again, a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. And one might assume that with all of the dust and debris
and everything that's thrown
up in the air, that could explain the fourth trumpet judgment.
Especially if it ignites or kickstarts volcanoes, because that would do it too.
There have been some definite weather changes as a result of massive volcanic eruptions in Earth's, within recorded history.
Yeah.
So this is fascinating on a couple of levels. First of all, that Tom had this vision, and again, we're only crediting this because Tom has somewhat of a track record, and we know him well enough to know that he wouldn't say this if he didn't feel compelled.
Neither of us would be working with him if he was that kind of person.
That is correct. But there's also the supernatural aspect here, as we're dealing with this prophetic proclamation by John 2,000 years ago, and you can't help but see the parallel in the hail and fire mixed with blood with one of the judgments of the Exodus.
Yeah. And the spiritual aspect is something that you contributed to the film, which I thought was phenomenal. And I know this is your show and you're the host, but I would love to turn it back on you and have you talk about some of that, because I thought you did an amazing job in the film.
This is something, and Sharon and I have been digging into this as we've been, and we'll talk about this because we're also going to record a program for Unraveling Revelation. So, we'll get more into that over there. But we have found in our study of the ancient Mesopotamian religions that this type of verbiage was used of their deities fairly frequently. In fact, hail, Barad in ancient Mesopotamia was a known entity. That word roughly translates as big chill, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And fire, there is a reference in Psalm 78 about God freeing the Israelites by destroying the cattle of the Egyptians with hail and thunderbolts. Right. And that word thunderbolts is actually Reshephim. Resheph was he was the Canaanite forerunner of Apollo. The Greeks and Romans called him Apollo, a plague god connected to fever, hence the word. But Reshephim means plural. Yeah. And then it follows that by saying a company of destroying angels.
And then isn't it interesting, the very next trumpet, we get Apollyon.
Well, yes, in trumpet number 5. But even the Great Mountain was the main epithet of the chief god of Mesopotamia. The creator god Enlil was called Great Mountain.
Wow.
His temple in the city of Nippur was the Ikur, which means house of the mountain. Or mountain, and that's where the gods of Mesopotamia congregated once a year to decree the fates of the nation, or the fates of the land. But Ezekiel, when he got his revelation, was by the river Kivar, and he repeats that in the book of Ezekiel like 5 times. The vision I had at the first by the river Kivar. The river Kivar was a canal dug off the Euphrates that ran right through the city of Nippur.
Oh, wow.
So Ezekiel's vision of God in his throne room was right over the temple of the Great Mountain.
Isn't it amazing how God does that?
Yes. So the question then becomes, are we looking at an entity or something in the natural, or both?
Yeah, and I think it's both, because it seems like there is a precedent, especially in Revelation, where something spiritual happens and there's a physical commonality or a consequence or result. There's something physical tied to it. And these events seem to coincide. There was actually a belief, and this might extend larger than this, but there was a belief with the ancient Essenes. They believed that the reason it was so important to do things on the right days and the right times and the right ways in the earthly temple is because in the heavenly temple, time operates the same in heaven as earth. And in the heavenly temple, the angels are performing those same tasks. Well, when we read Revelation 8, we see stuff with like Day of Atonement rituals and things in the heavenly temple. So it does seem like there is some kind of biblical precedent. I wouldn't want to stretch it too far, but there's some kind of connection between when things happen in the spiritual world, there's some kind of physical result or connection to it.
There's more of a connection between the supernatural realm and the natural in the ancient world that we have lost in our modern Western world.
Yeah.
Except for those who are really into the New Age, but they've got the wrong interpretation.
Right.
But they understood in the ancient world there was no separation between, well, forget church and state. There was no separation between the natural and the supernatural.
Yeah.
The dead ancestors continued to be a part of the daily life of your typical Mesopotamian. They were with you, and that's why you had to feed them once a month, because you didn't like dead grandpa when he was angry. But even the word mountain in ancient Sumerian, the word Ker, also meant underworld.
Oh, wow.
So the great mountain also could mean like the great below, or the house of the mountain would mean house of the netherworld. But you see that even in Hebrew with the word eretz, that means earth. It also refers to the netherworld.
You know,
There's a connection between as above, so below, which is that's an occult precept.
Yeah, of course.
But that's just a twisting of the way God created things.
Yeah, and it makes sense too, because the Essenes also had this view of ages, which I've talked about and written about. But basically, the idea is right now, since Jesus and continuing on, we're living in the age of grace, which Christians would say that anyway. But they had this belief that there was going to be a big change. And I think what that change is the restrainer. And I personally believe that's the Holy Spirit in believers. And I think that that's the restraining force holding back the kingdom of darkness. And you know this, you can even see this in ancient church fathers and writings and stuff. Like Apollo wasn't able to lie forever. And then eventually he just left and he couldn't even manifest anymore. I think in Old Testament times, these things were known to have this connection because they were able to manifest a lot more, and they can't really do it today because of the restrainer. But once we're out of here, and I'm a preacher believer, and I'm not trying to polarize anybody, or I've actually at one point or another have believed all of the views. So I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the world if I was upset with somebody for having a different view. But if that's correct, if the removal of the restrainer is a pre-tribulation rapture, well, now you're to an earth where the restrainer's gone and these things can manifest again. That connection would be back. So that could be, and again, I don't want to stretch it too far, could be some of the things that we're reading in Revelation where it's like, is this an angel or is this a physical thing? And well, like you say in the movie, it could be both.
So the Essenes, let's pick up there, because I'm really, really intrigued by that, and I've not had the opportunity or the time to read your book, which was The Lost Mysteries of the Essenes. Did I get that correct?
The missing prophecies of the missing Essenes. Lost prophecies of Qumran. I was making fun of it. I have to do it.
But we're in the age of grace, and we're approaching a time that is very significant in their final calendar.
Yes, 2025 to them. There's many ifs here. If we're understanding their calendar correctly, because we could easily be a year off or a couple years off even. I mean, we're talking about a calendar that spans 7,000 years. But we can gauge it pretty well because according to them, the end of the age of Torah, an age is 2,000 years, happened in 75 AD. So that's just a couple years after the destruction of the temple.
Right.
Well, if that's the case, and if we're understanding our years correctly in their calendar, then the next end of the age, which also explains a lot of that end of the age talk throughout Gospels, it's like, well, end of which age? Age of Torah or age of grace or of all the ages? Because there's an end coming there too. If we're understanding all that correctly, 2075 would be the end of our age, which would mean the final Jubilee, which is 50 years, and the Essenes, that was part of their, like how we have centuries and decades, they had like Jubilees and Shemitahs and stuff. But the Jubilee was really important at the end of an age because it marked where that age was about to end and the new one was about to begin. But what's interesting is it seems like the new coming age starts before the old one ends. So when we wouldn't say that the age of grace started in 75 AD. Most Christians wouldn't say that. They would say probably the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, or the crucifixion of Jesus, or some might say even the birth of Jesus, somewhere around there. Probably most wouldn't say that, but at least around his ministry. Well, think about what happened between 25 AD and 75 AD. At the very beginning of the final Jubilee, you got everything with Jesus, so many prophecies fulfilled, and then you have kind of a long period of time till while everything's kind of getting in place for the Age of Grace, till the temple gets destroyed, and that's like the final nail in the coffin. Well, wouldn't that be interesting if that happened at our final Jubilee, which would start in 2025 and then end in 2075? We could have the whole tribulation in early in the Jubilee. And then how long does it take to teach people of the world that survive the new rules? How long does it take to judge the nations? How long does it take for all that stuff? Could be decades, who knows? That could bring us to 2075, where where everything is finally in place for the millennium to begin, and we have that final Sabbath age of 1,000 years.
Wow. What was the most remarkable thing, with just about 2 minutes left,
Sure.
the most remarkable thing that you learned during the production of the film?
Well, research-wise, it was probably that the Jubilee thing of the Essenes connects with Tom's vision. And Tom's vision, because he didn't know that. Like, I can guarantee, attest, he did not. I was the one that told him that, and he was already talking about the vision. So he didn't get that from me. He didn't put that together on his own. He couldn't have. That to me was the most fascinating. Practically speaking, just being a filmmaker, just how much you can do with a little bit. And that's kind of related to science. I mean, I made my own PVC pipe backdrop frame, because backdrop frames are really expensive. I didn't want to pay that much money. So that was surprising how much you can get, with a little bit.
Yeah. And we appreciate your support, which has made the film possible. It is available at the Skywatch TV store, online, skywatchtvstore.com. There's a special offer available there. We do not carry it at the Gilbert House store, but we're happy to direct you to Skywatch TV for the work going on at Whispering Ponies Ranch. Also, Josh's book. Again, the title, please.
Lost Prophecies of Qumran. Now you're making me think about it. I got to make sure I get my own title right.
And we encourage you to get that and the book of Dr. Ken Johnson.
Now that one's, Mystery of the Scenes. That's where the mystery is coming from.
Gotcha, okay.
That's why I'm not blaming you too much.
I appreciate that. Both of those available as a special package offer at the Skywatch TV store as well. It is fascinating, jaw-dropping, and the thing I appreciate most was that Tom emphasized the point that we don't know for sure what's going to happen in 2025. Right. We don't know what's going to happen in 2029. We don't know what's going to happen in 2075. But what we do know is that our time grows short.
Amen.
And we need to take advantage of what time we have left and the gifts with which we've been blessed to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. And here we've got an opportunity to do it with a film that will draw people in, because it doesn't have a Christian-y title. It may be something you can use to witness to curious friends, neighbors, family members who might not otherwise sit still for a movie, a documentary about Bible prophecy. Josh Peck, the filmmaker,
Thank you.
film Ragnarok, Humanity's Last Stand, and we thank you for watching. This is SciFriday.
SciFriday is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at scifriday.tv and gilberthouse.org. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.